Okay.
Listen, can you make sure you get my
What is this?
can you make sure you get my license to carry? My license to carry is on my chest.
Is this fake? You know, a lot of people like to act like they're cops.
Federal agent.
A routine traffic stop turns into pure chaos. A young officer pulls over a white Chevy SUV, but he has no idea who's inside. He mocks, threatens, even tries to intimidate the driver until the man calmly reveals something that flips the entire situation upside down. The officer's attitude changes instantly, because this isn't just any driver. He's a federal agent, and the moment that badge comes out, everything falls apart. The story begins in a quiet Florida parking lot. Nothing unusual, just a calm afternoon. But in just a few minutes, that calm will explode into tension, arrogance, and one of the biggest mistakes an officer can make. A white Chevy SUV rolls to a stop. Inside sits a man, calm, composed, recording everything on his phone. He has no idea the officer approaching him thinks he already knows everything. The cop walks up aggressively. No greeting, no explanation. Just orders. He demands, "Open the window. All the way. Put the phone down. Open all the windows." The driver keeps his voice controlled. "Why do you want all the windows open?" But the officer refuses to answer. He keeps repeating the same command, like he's trying to show power rather than maintain safety. The driver explains, "I'm recording." The officer snaps back, "Open all the windows. Anybody else in the vehicle?" He asks again, still aggressive, still acting like a threat exists that he can't justify. The man answers honestly, "No, there's nobody else." The officer barely listens. Instead, he tries to belittle him. "You know why I pulled you over?" The man calmly responds, "No." The officer claims he saw him swerving, failing to signal. But there's no hesitation you'd normally hear from an officer explaining a real violation. It sounds more like an excuse he made up while walking toward the vehicle. He lets out insults, calling the man weird, mocking him for looking things up on his phone. He isn't de-escalating. He's provoking. Then, his tone shifts. Not calmer, but colder. He suddenly says, "You want me to make your life difficult? Because I love making people's lives difficult." This isn't professionalism. This is personal. A cop who enjoys control more than truth. The man cooperates, opens the windows, yet the officer acts as if he's winning some power contest. Then he demands, license, registration, insurance. Reasonable, until he continues insulting him. "Stop with your little TikTok thing." The driver remains calm, but he pushes back with a simple request, "Can you call your supervisor?" And instantly, the officer lies. "There is no supervisor. I'm the most senior officer on the road." That's the moment everything changes. The driver now knows this cop doesn't want oversight, because he knows he's wrong. The officer still won't explain the stop. He repeats his story, louder, acting offended, trying to twist the narrative. Then he escalates again. He orders, "Step out of the vehicle." The man stays calm, asks why, but the officer interrupts, demanding immediate compliance. No patience, no clarity, just force. At this point, the driver has a critical decision: resist, or cooperate and let the truth reveal itself. He slowly steps out, hands visible, controlled, careful. The officer asks if he has any weapons. The man answers honestly, "I have a gun right here on my side." But instead of following proper safety procedure, the officer reacts recklessly. Quick radio call, tension skyrockets. More aggressive commands, more accusations. He begins searching him, still treating him like a criminal, even though he's been calm, direct, and compliant. And that's when the first clue about who this man is appears, a badge, hanging from his neck. But the cop doesn't notice, not yet, because he's too focused on proving dominance to see the storm he's about to unleash on himself. The moment the officer finally notices something on the man's chest, his tone shifts, but only slightly. Hanging around the driver's neck is a badge. Not a cheap replica, not a novelty, but a federal credential. Still, the officer refuses to acknowledge it. Instead, he continues the pat-down, searching for more weapons as if the badge means nothing. The driver stays respectful, but there's a hint of disbelief in his voice. He repeats calmly, "My license to carry is on my chest." But the officer ignores him, almost like he's afraid to accept reality. He mocks him again. "So, it's on your chest, huh? Is that what we're doing today?" Then he throws another insult, accusing him of being a gang member or a drug dealer with absolutely zero evidence. Just blind assumption. He tells the man to spread his feet, wider, then wider again, like he's trying to humiliate him. For the man, this isn't new. He's seen egos in uniform before, but this one is reckless. Finally, the officer grabs the badge. He looks at it closely, and suddenly, the confidence fades, because staring back at him is the last thing he expected. A valid federal ID. The driver calmly explains, "I carry it around my neck." The officer hesitates. His voice cracks just slightly. He's realizing, this isn't a random driver, this isn't somebody he can bully, this is a federal agent, and just like that, the narrative flips. The officer, once arrogant and hostile, tries to save face. "Lean on the car," he says, but the aggression is gone. He sounds unsure, confused, maybe even scared. He tries to justify his actions. He repeats the same excuse, "You were swerving. You didn't signal." But now, it sounds hollow, a weak cover story in a situation he no longer controls. The federal agent questions him back. Why did he ignore procedure? Why didn't he call a supervisor? Why escalate instead of explain? The officer has no answers, just excuses. He even tries to claim he smelled alcohol. Another false accusation to justify the chaos he created. But the agent stands firm. "We don't drink," he says. That's when the officer begins to panic. He radios for backup, finally, after everything has already gone wrong. But it's too late. The agent explains. He wasn't resisting. He cooperated. He followed orders. Yet he was searched, mocked, insulted, and falsely accused. Why? Because the officer saw a black man and assumed criminal. Not federal law enforcement, not a professional, not an equal. The officer stumbles over his words. He removes the handcuffs, with shaky hands, tries to play it off, pretending nothing is wrong. But his voice betrays him. He knows he crossed every line. He tries to lighten the moment, makes awkward small talk, even tries to blame the agent for not identifying himself, as if the badge around his neck wasn't enough. The agent stays composed. He reminds him, he did show his badge. The officer simply refused to believe it, and now he's standing face to face with the consequences. Because detaining a federal agent without cause is not just embarrassing, it's career-ending. Suddenly, the officer wants peace. He wants this to go away quietly. He suggests they don't need to go that far. But the agent responds with calm power. "We're going to talk to your sergeant." The officer freezes. He tries to negotiate. But it's over. This stop isn't his anymore. The control has shifted. As the situation grows tense, the officer's radio crackles. Backup has been requested, but not because the driver was dangerous, only because the officer lost control. Suddenly, the arrogance that filled the air minutes ago begins to fade. You can hear it in his voice. He's trying to calm things down, trying to sound friendly, like all of this was just a misunderstanding. But the agent, he's not fooled. He stands steady, hands visible. He never raised his voice, never resisted, never threatened. He simply waits. The officer rambles, trying to justify himself. He claims the stop was legitimate, says the driving looked suspicious, says he didn't know who he was dealing with. But that excuse falls flat. Because even if the stop was lawful, the humiliation, the insults, the unnecessary aggression, none of that was. The man wasn't treated like a citizen. He was treated like a criminal from the moment the window rolled down. The officer keeps talking and talking, like he's trying to rewrite the story before backup arrives. He even blames the agent, saying he should have identified himself sooner. But he did. The badge was visible. He repeated it multiple times. The truth is simple. The officer didn't want to hear it. Now, with backup moments away, he begins to panic inside. You can almost hear his thoughts. What if this guy files a complaint? What if he reports me? What if I lose my badge? Every second feels heavier. The agent stays calm, almost too calm, and that is what scares the officer the most. Because calmness means control. He knows the law. He knows procedure. He knows exactly how wrong this entire stop is. Suddenly, another officer approaches. He takes one look at the agent, the badge around his neck, the way he carries himself, and immediately realizes something isn't right. The new officer's tone is different, measured, professional, nothing like the first. He asks questions, simple, respectful questions. The first officer jumps in, talking too quickly, too defensively, trying to shape the narrative before the truth unfolds. But the more he speaks, the more obvious it becomes. He's scrambling. The backup officer listens and then turns to the agent. Calmly, politely, he asks for clarification, and the agent explains. Brief, factual, without emotion. He shows his credentials again. This time, someone actually looks. You see it in the backup officer's face? Recognition. This isn't just anyone. This is federal. Immediately his posture changes. He apologizes, not formally, but you can hear the regret. Then he turns to the first officer. And that's the moment everything shifts. Because now, the officer who was mocking, bullying, insulting, stands silent. His partner's expression says it all. You messed up, badly. The silence is painful. Exposed ego, collapsing bravado. The agent doesn't rub it in. He doesn't yell. He doesn't gloat. He simply waits for the officer to do his job properly, something he failed to do from the start. The senior officer now suggests removing the cuffs. His hands hesitate, because he knows every second is being recorded. Every mistake, every insult, every illegal action. And the camera never blinks. The cuffs click open. Freedom, but not forgiveness. The officer tries to make small talk, desperate to smooth things over, but the damage is done. A simple traffic stop has become a career-defining disaster. And the federal agent? He's not done. Because now, it's his turn to ask the questions. The cuffs come off, but the humiliation doesn't. The officer forces a smile, the kind of awkward grin someone wears when they know they've crossed a line they can't erase. But the agent isn't smiling. He calmly adjusts his clothes, fixes his shirt, and looks the officer in the eye. His first words are simple, measured, controlled. Why did you treat me like a criminal? The officer stutters, grasping for excuses. He talks about procedure, about safety, about suspicious driving. But the agent cuts through it. Why didn't you call a supervisor when I requested one? Silence. Because there is no good answer. The officer tries to talk around it, claiming he didn't need one, that he was the senior officer on duty. It's a lie, and everyone knows it. The agent presses again. You searched me. You took my weapon. You put me in cuffs. All without cause. The officer blinks. He's sweating now. His posture, once dominant, has collapsed. His partner stands quietly, not saying a word. He knows this looks bad. Very bad. Then the agent picks up his badge, still hanging from his neck, and lifts it for both officers to see. This was visible the entire time. The first officer tries to spin it. He claims that fake badges are common, that criminals impersonate federal agents, that he was just being careful. But careful is not what happened here. This wasn't caution. It was harassment. It was a power trip that spiraled into chaos because ego replaced protocol. The agent keeps his tone calm, almost gentle, which somehow makes his words cut deeper. Even after I told you who I am, you treated me like a threat. Why? No answer, because the real reason is one he can't say out loud. The backup officer finally steps in. He speaks calmly, professionally. He acknowledges the agent's status, confirms the badge, and offers a quiet apology. Not on record, but enough to show he recognizes the wrong. He turns to the first officer and you can feel the tension. Their eyes lock. And for a moment nothing is said, because there's nothing to say. The agent then asks the question that shatters the room. Would this have happened if I didn't look the way I look? Silence. Long, heavy silence. The officer freezes, his mind racing, searching for a safe answer that doesn't exist. The truth hangs in the air like a confession, because yes, it did happen because of how he looked, and everyone knows it. The backup officer gently suggests ending the stop. He recommends the agent be allowed to go, but the first officer, still trying to salvage his pride, stops him. He insists he had every right to conduct the stop. He tries to rewrite reality to make himself look justified, but it's too late. The camera caught everything: the insults, the threats, the illegal search, the refusal to call a supervisor, the wrongful detention of a federal agent doing absolutely nothing wrong. The agent shakes his head slowly. I'll be filing a report, and trust me, it won't be the first. The officer swallows hard. He knows what that means: internal affairs, paperwork, possibly suspension, and if the video goes public, disaster. The agent turns to leave, but before he does, he says one last thing, a warning masked as courtesy. You should treat everyone the way you wish you treated me today. And then he walks away. The officers watch, silent, their careers hanging by a thread, because this encounter is far from over. It's only the beginning. The road is quiet again, but the damage is done. As the federal agent drives away, the officer tries to collect himself, but his shaky breathing tells the whole story. He knows he didn't just mess up, he messed up big. Because when you wrongfully detain a federal officer, you don't just walk away from it. Meanwhile, the agent pulls into his office parking lot, parks the SUV, and sits for a moment, not out of fear, but focus. He replays every detail in his mind: the first command, the illegal order, the insults, the cuffs. He knows the system, because he is the system. And what just happened isn't something you ignore. Inside his office, he grabs his work phone and calls his supervisor. The conversation is short, professional, exact. He explains the stop, the escalation without cause, the search, the cuffs, and the refusal to verify his federal status. His supervisor doesn't hesitate. File it, immediately. And so he does. He drafts the report with precision. Time, location, events, every word spoken, every command ignored. He attaches the body cam reference, the witness footage he recorded, and the badge identification that the officer mishandled. It's airtight. Only hours later, the police department's internal affairs receives the official notice. One agent's report has now triggered a full investigation. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding, it was abuse. Word spreads quietly through the department. Whispers, rumors, tension. Officers talk among themselves. Some defend protocol, but most know the truth. This was unnecessary, unprofessional, and dangerous. The officer in question, still trying to convince himself he did nothing wrong, is suddenly called in. He's instructed to surrender his body cam footage. He does. They review it, and what they see is exactly what we saw. Tone, threats, mockery, zero professionalism, zero reason to escalate. He never called a supervisor. He never followed procedure. He never backed down even when presented with a badge. This isn't training. This is ego. Internal Affairs places him on administrative leave pending review. His badge and weapon are taken. He's sent home. No patrol, no uniform, just silence. And the silence is loud. At home, he tries to act normal, but his phone doesn't stop buzzing. Colleagues, sergeants, commanders, everyone wants to know what happened, but he has no good answer, because the footage says everything for him. Meanwhile, the agent's report travels upward. Chain of command, office directors, regional supervisors, and with every level, the concern grows. A federal agent handcuffed on a routine stop, not because of danger, not because of suspicion, but because an officer wanted to make someone's life difficult. That's not policing. That's harassment. Soon, the case pulls in higher oversight. The local police chief is notified. He watches the footage. His face tightens with embarrassment, because this isn't just a mistake. This makes the entire department look reckless. A meeting is called. Closed doors, serious faces. The chief asks one question. Why didn't you call a supervisor? There's no answer, just excuses. I thought. I felt. I assumed. None of it matters. Policy was broken. Protocol was ignored. A federal agent was wrongly detained. The chief ends the meeting with a single statement. We'll handle this. Which is code for, your future here is in jeopardy. The agent is updated on the investigation. He's thanked for maintaining professionalism during the stop. He doesn't celebrate. He doesn't boast. He simply says, this can't keep happening. Because for him, this isn't about winning. This is about accountability. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs begins interviewing everyone involved. The partner officer, who stayed mostly silent, corroborates details and confirms protocol was not followed. He becomes the strongest witness against his own partner. And slowly, the case builds. Discipline is coming. The question is, how severe? Because this incident is already bigger than that officer realizes, and soon, it's going to reach even more powerful hands. The officer finally removed the handcuffs, his hands trembling as if he could barely control them. The FBI agent dusted off his shirt, calmly slipping his badge back around his neck. The silence was heavy, the kind that makes guilt echo louder than sirens. The officer mumbled an apology under his breath, trying to sound professional, but every word was dripping with panic. He knew he had crossed a line. And this time, the man he profiled wasn't helpless. He was federal law enforcement. The agent didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply stared at him, the way only someone who knows exactly how the system works can. Then he said quietly, "Call your sergeant. Now." A few minutes later, the supervisor arrived. He took one look at the restrained agent, the pulled weapon, the unnecessary backup request, and his expression froze. He dismissed the junior officer to the side and spoke privately with the agent, reviewing his credentials properly, something that should have been done from the start. Within seconds, the supervisor knew the truth. This wasn't just a traffic stop gone wrong. It was a clear case of harassment, unlawful detainment, and racial profiling. The supervisor tried to smooth it over, offering excuses. Miscommunication, confusing situation, you understand. But the agent wasn't interested in excuses. He documented everything. Badge numbers, timestamps, body cam positioning, and made it clear he would be filing an official report. Because unlike countless victims who never get justice, he had proof, he had authority, and he was willing to fight back. And he did. In the following days, the story spread. First inside law enforcement circles, then into the public. What began as a simple traffic stop became a local scandal, then a national conversation. People demanded accountability. News outlets picked it up. Civil rights groups weighed in. How could a trained officer treat a black federal agent like a criminal over nothing? A formal investigation was launched. Body cam footage confirmed everything, from the officer's aggression and insults to the unlawful search to the moment he mocked the badge, right before panicking once it turned out to be real. The department tried to contain the damage, but it was too late. The officer was suspended first, then removed from patrol. And eventually, the department quietly terminated him, a rare consequence in a system that protects its own. As for the agent, he returned to work with even greater respect from colleagues who heard what happened. But the incident changed him. He had spent years protecting the country, only to be treated like a criminal by the very people sworn to uphold the law. He later spoke about the experience, not with bitterness, but with purpose. He said, "If this can happen to someone with a badge and training, imagine what happens to those who don't have either." And that message resonated. It forced the department to add new training on bias and stop and search procedures. It inspired others who had stayed silent to finally come forward. Because the truth is simple. No uniform, not even an FBI one, can protect a black man from prejudice. But when people stand up, speak out, and refuse to stay silent, change becomes possible. This story isn't just about a traffic stop. It's about power abused, courage displayed, and a reminder that justice isn't given, it's demanded.